Hello and welcome to this episode of the Huron Chamber Connect podcast, brought to you by the Huron Chamber of Commerce. My name is Colin Carmichael. I am the Executive Director of the Huron Chamber of Commerce and the host of the podcast. I'm very pleased this week to have as my guest Stu Harrison, who is the Executive Director of the CCEO, which is the Chamber. You know what? Stu, I should have made better notes because I refer to it so often as CCEO that it went completely out of my head what that stands for. Chambers of Commerce Executives Ontario. Did I get that right?
Yep.
I should have just gone with it. But anyway, so Stu, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here.
So why don't we, we'll start as I always do on the podcast, ask you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Stu, and then a little bit about, CCEO, starting with what it stands for, I guess,
Yeah.
And kind of what the CCEO does, and how it supports the chamber network.
For sure. So I live in the Peterborough area, so I've been in Ontario for a good chunk of my life. And a media background largely is what I brought to the Peterborough Chamber, which I managed. I was in your role for about 20 years at the Peterborough Chamber. And then when I retired, the opportunity came along to run CCEO. And so who we are is essentially a professional development organization that provides training for chamber staff in Ontario, much like yourself, the majority running smaller chambers, much like yourself as well. We certainly have the Mississauga Boards of Trade and London Chamber of Commerce and some of the larger chambers that have 4 or 5 staff, some more than that, but the vast majority are smaller community chambers of commerce with 1 or 2 people on staff. And the Chamber of Commerce, as an entity, can be a fairly lonely place to run, because especially if you're working on your own, not that you're not working with your members and seeing lots of people and running your events and that sort of thing, but when it comes right down to it, when it comes to running a not-for-profit organization managed by a board of directors, there's a lot of stuff that you have to figure out, especially coming into your role, in the last couple of years. There was a lot of stuff that you just had to figure out on running an organization, running a chamber of commerce, everything from, whether or not you run the Christmas parade to meeting payroll, to managing the bank account, to working for a board of directors, et cetera, et cetera. And so as an organization, we talk about all of that stuff on a fairly regular basis. We've got a number of communication tools, a newsletter, a monthly conversation, much like this. It's a Zoom conversation. There's usually 20 or 30 people on the call. And it's really just an open conversation about what's happening this month, what's keeping you up at night, what are some of your wins, what are your frustrations, that sort of thing. And then we do an annual conference that is a fairly significant undertaking. It's held in an Ontario city. We just did one 2 weeks ago in Burlington. There was about 75 chamber staff there, and plus a lot of sponsors who support the chamber network, providing various products and services to chambers like you.
So you mentioned the chamber network, and that I really want to pick up on, because when I talk to my members, of course, we talk about what the chamber does locally and the work that we do, and whether that's advocacy or resources or connecting folks, that kind of thing. But part of the value of being a member of your local chamber is having access to that broader chamber network, and some folks are familiar with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and that kind of layer of the network. But there's this other layer that you represent, right, of where folks like me and other chamber executives and staff are able to learn from each other and share resources and steal ideas, for lack of a better, it's
R&D.
The R&D, yeah, rip off and duplicate, yeah. So
Yep.
it's and those Zoom calls that you mentioned have been really valuable for me. Helping me understand the role of chambers in their local communities, and recognizing that they're all unique, and each kind of serves this community in a unique way, but also
Yeah.
just highlighting the possibilities, the potential, the things that we maybe haven't thought of, and so that's been really super valuable for me. I know that CCEO has evolved relatively recently. There's speaking of network, it's kind of
Hmm.
become part of a national network of similar, provincial or regional. Maybe just you're the expert more than I am on that, and just in terms of how that better serves the chamber network.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first one I just want to circle back because I think that it's quite likely that not everyone listening to this or watching this knows that there is a network of chambers of commerce, and most chambers are operating at all three levels of government. So you are a voice for your members at the municipal level, at the provincial level through the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and at the national level through the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And it's that collective voice that gives the Chamber of Commerce its power and its influence because we're seen as having evidence-based, well-researched, um, um, results-based um, advocacy. And so when we weigh in, we're representing the business community, whether it's a municipal issue, a provincial issue, or a federal issue. The politicians typically listen because we've got credible research and opinions behind us and the voice of the business community. So I just wanted to touch on that
Mhm.
because I'm sure that there are people who don't realize that your chamber is part of that network, and that's where you get your influence, and that's why it's worthwhile being a member.
Mhm.
So, from a staffing point of view, I think you've nailed it. It really is a support network for staff, and not just new staff. People are learning from you as much as you're learning from people. Famously, we had Debbie Nicholson from the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce, who was the CEO of the Sudbury Chamber for 45 years.
Wow.
And so we always teased her about, first of all, being the queen, but also being 12 years old when she started. But like she had a complete career
Hmm.
as the CEO of the Sudbury Chamber. I was 20 years in Peterborough, but it doesn't matter whether you've been in the network 6 months. We had someone at the conference a couple of weeks ago who had started 2 weeks ago. And so, it doesn't matter whether you're brand new or a grizzled veteran, you can learn from each other. And that really is the idea behind having that monthly call where you can just vent or learn from somebody or steal something from someone. There's a Facebook group that
Hmm.
provides tremendous support as well. I know you're very active on our Facebook group, and
Any,
how valuable, right?
anyone who knows me is not surprised that
Yeah,
I
well,
am very active in the Facebook group. But anyway.
well, that's good. And then nationally, there has always been a CCEC, so Chamber of Commerce Executives of Canada, and a provincial organization. There was much smaller organizations that didn't have staff in most of the other provinces. I think BC Chamber Executives is really the only other one that even has a part-time employee like myself. And so we just got together, and the moons were aligned. The people that were in place were really believing in a national organization. And so we really essentially created a federation that with the Chamber of Commerce Executives of Canada as the umbrella organization, and then provincial chapters. And so the Ontario Chamber is now a chapter of CCEC, and it really just it helps us avoid duplication. So, for example, if you need a template for something that you don't have, trying to think of something that you would need, like a bylaw that there's a specific part of your bylaws, or in some cases bylaws. Um, there's a place to go for that, and instead of all the provincial organizations trying to organize that, there's one organization, and that's the parent organization, CCEC. And so they now have an awesome resource where you can go and pick up a template or a marketing plan, or a template of an example of something that you want to promote for Small Business Week, or an upcoming, your Business Excellence Awards, or a judging form for your Excellence Awards, or that sort of thing. Anything and everything is there as a resource for you, because there's no use reinventing the wheel if
Mhm.
another chamber is doing it.
Well, and that's one of I think the really big values of these of CCEO and CCEC is that is not reinventing the wheel, and not having to figure it out yourself. When other folks have, if not figured it out, I mean, figured it out for them. And there's always that local, you always have to kind of tweak things for your own, what works in Peterborough doesn't necessarily translate to Huron County, for example. And so, but it's helpful to have even just the history, being able to talk to folks like yourself and the other. I was doing the math in my head. It's like, if I'm here 45 years, I'll be no. But being able to lean on that experience and the number of times where golf tournaments
Hmm.
is always is an annual kind of conversation that we have as a group, I think. And
Yeah.
and just trying to you know if attendance is down, is it me, or is this like is this a provincial trend? And you can
Yeah.
sometimes feel better about your own situation if you realize it's happening with other
Yeah.
folks as well.
Or pick up a marketing tip from them, or
Yeah,
whether or
well, or
not
the
you.
different things you can do at a golf tournament and to make it
Yeah.
more interesting, or other thing. We had trouble a few years ago, not us, but someone might say, we have, and we added this component and it worked really well, or involving charities or not, and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things. It's really valuable to lean on that experience, because often I think in these roles, and there isn't a lot of, especially in kind of sole staff organizations like ours, where there isn't a lot of institutional knowledge to lean on within the organization. I mean, I have people I can call, and some of our board members have been around long enough that I can ask them. But it's still all that's within the context of our little chamber on Ontario's West Coast, right? So it's not necessarily that being able to leverage the experience from across the province and across the country is really a really important aspect. The conference, of course, is you mentioned, and I'll let you expand on that a little bit, because it's a big part of doing that. Now, I admittedly have not been able to attend, just due to scheduling and kind of our calendar here in Huron County hasn't allowed me to get there yet. I do hope to get there next year, but let's talk a little bit about the conference and what that brings to the network, and the kinds of things that you talk about there.
Well, it's just an expansion, really, of the programming that we offer, which is, workshops, seminars, guest speakers. So we had, one of the considered a guru in the chamber industry, Frank Kenny, who was there talking about the 7 trends that are happening now within the chamber network, which was certainly illuminating. And then one of those trends is artificial intelligence. And so he spent a second hour the next day going through how chambers of commerce specifically are using artificial intelligence to, improve their service, save themselves some time, expand their horizons, all of that sort of thing. But really just some real down in the trenches tools and things to do and how to utilize different platforms of AI. So just as an example, but I think it's equally important to build relationships at those conferences. We allow a lot of time for people, whether or not it's the opening night dinner. The conference really runs, 2.5 days. Everybody usually arrives on the Monday. We have like a really relaxed opening night dinner, assigned seating. So we're deliberately spreading people around and making sure that they're meeting new people. And then the second day, the Tuesday, is a full day of conference. And then the host chamber usually has some sort of a host night on the Tuesday night. And then Wednesday morning, and then we like to get everybody back on the road by 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday because they typically have to either drive, across the GTA or, a fair distance to get back home. So we want to get them, back to the grindstone as soon as as soon as we can. So
Yeah,
that's
that
the structure of it.
in person, as much as we do so much by Zoom now and the Facebook group, there is still value in that face to face and
Yeah.
not feeling that you're confined to your 1 hour a month Zoom call kind of thing. I'm lucky here in that several of the chamber chamber folks, at least in southwestern Ontario, visit my county on a regular basis, or have cottages here, or so
Yep.
I've been able to have face to face with some of my colleagues from across the province, just because they come to the county for vacation, and I could I steal
Mm.
them for a coffee kind
Yep.
of thing, and which has been good, and they've been
Yeah.
really good supports for me. Dave Prang in Brantford
Yep.
is a good example of his family has a cottage in this area. So at least once a year I get to sit and have a coffee with David, which is great.
Yeah. We're a
And
generous bunch.
well, yeah, I mean, all of those folks are an email or phone call away for any question, and they've kind of all been there, and as
Yep.
I'm kind of coming up on 2 years, and it's been really really valuable for me to have that network that's willing and able to help me figure some things out, because it has been
Well,
quite a year of growth and transition in this chamber as well, and I'm kind of figuring out what a chamber is, what a chamber does, initially, when I first considered, taking on this role, which actually
yeah.
brings me to something I wanted to chat with you about, and that's how chambers have evolved, and in the work that we do, and it's a little bit cyclical, I think, and it kind of depends on the needs of the time, but I think there's a perception, at least the perception I had before I joined the chamber, yeah, family, as it is that it was a old boys club, or that kind of middle-aged white guys like you and I in back rooms smoking cigars and drinking whiskey, or whatever, and
Yep.
planning world domination or whatever, and that's really not, that's not,
No.
if that's what chambers ever were, and I'm not convinced necessarily that they were. Depends on where and who, I suppose. But that's in my experience now, for sure, is not what most chambers are anymore, and that you know. I know that we had a pre-conversation about this, so I know that you're much more a White Christmas family than a It's a Wonderful Life family. But for the viewers and listeners who are familiar with It's a Wonderful Life, this, like, the analogy that came to me when I came to understand what a chamber of commerce is and could be, is the difference between Mr. Potter and George Bailey, and Mr. Potter was all about profit and exploitation and the worst parts of capitalism, whereas George Bailey just wanted to make his town a great place to live and work, right? And that's all he wanted to do. And that's, my experience with chambers is that's who they are. Chambers are really wanting to build their communities, develop their communities, and help businesses grow, but not at the expense of the community, and in fact in support of the community. So I mean, you've been in the business a long time. How have you kind of seen that evolution over the last, I don't know, 30 years? You've kind of been around the biz, right?
Yeah, well, and it involved in the chamber long before I managed it. But even understanding the history, the original charter, for example, for the Peterborough Chamber was definitely, group of old white guys with cigars. I mean, it was certainly the classic stereotype, but that was the business community 130 some years ago, right?
Mm,
And so you can't dismiss that, but it's important to recognize it. But some of the language in their original charter was that we're here to make sure things work out right. And if that isn't a classic controlled capitalist type of
yeah,
mandate, then I don't know what is,
yeah,
you know. But at the same time, when you look at both the makeup of the chamber, it's dramatically more than 50% females running chambers of commerce.
yeah,
Diversity, I could point out multiple examples of all sorts of different kinds of diversity, but we've got DEI figured out. There's no question about that. And I don't know of a chamber that doesn't have some sort of a DEI approach to their membership as well, so that they're making themselves much more open and approachable. Because, in fairness, that has not always been the case. And partly just a lack of awareness, and also just not really taking the initiative and being more open. But there's some really encouraging things along those lines. And then policy wise, I mean, I've seen slogans like strengthening the community, as opposed to strengthening business. And I think that's a shift. You were probably involved last year with the St. Thomas Chamber
I,
that
I,
did
I was
quite
going to
a
raise that, yeah, as a great example.
well. You explain the example, because you probably have the language down more than me, but it's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, the chamber led, or co-led, I suppose, this, an initiative to tackle homelessness in St. Thomas, and because, social issues are business issues, and
Exactly.
that's, it's not someone else's problem.
Yeah.
And often I think the stereotype is that businesses only care about homelessness in as much as, to make sure there's no one sleeping in their doorway. Well,
Yeah.
that is sometimes the case, and I think, you know, modern chambers take a broader view, and say, look, yes, that is an issue for an individual business at a particular time, but the chamber has a role to play in creating an environment, an economic environment where we can tackle something like homelessness, not alone,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
in partnership with municipal governments and provincial governments, and the United Ways of the world, and other organizations that tackle these things. And I think the chamber as a as what I've tried to instill here in Huron County is establishing the Huron Chamber of Commerce as a partner in those things beyond just profits and sales
Yeah.
and those kinds of things. So
If you look at, as you know, the part of the chamber advocacy lobbying approach is a policy resolution, which is an official researched paper making specific recommendations to government, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal. But if you look at the provincial and federal policy books that are, produced every year by the Ontario and Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which is a grassroots process, you'll find all kinds of social issue related policy resolutions around everything from providing daycare, because that's also a business issue, to indigenous issues, to
yeah,
energy issues, you name it. There's all sorts of things that you wouldn't normally consider business issues, but they are.
yeah. Well, we are running short of time, so I think you and I could probably do an entire episode just on advocacy. I know Peterborough has been active for a very long time on the advocacy front, and is still active on advocacy, and what that looks like has evolved over time.
Hmm. Well, let's do it.
But yeah, we'll do this again probably sometime in the new year, and just talk about advocacy maybe, or anything else in the long list of things that we didn't get to in this half hour. But I always promise people that this is not one of those 2 hour podcasts where you have to so it's we try to stay to that 30 minutes, and we're about there now. So anyway, with that, I'll thank you, Stu, for being a guest on the podcast, and I think it's important for the members of the Huron Chamber and the community to be aware that this is a larger network of chambers, and that we're not kind of on our own, and that there's this larger support network, and you're a big part of making sure that that's an effective way for us to serve our members.
Yeah, thank you. So are you. I
Right.
appreciate it.
Good. Well, until we chat again on the Zoom machine, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.